Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at helicopter aerobatics, something you don't do with helicopters. That being said, there are actually quite a few fun things that you can do with a helicopter safely. Now for the purposes of this, one of the things I did do is I shut off damage, which feels incredibly scandalous to me. One thing that our viewers at home never get to see is all the times I snap pieces of aircraft and helicopters off and all my outtakes, which is unfortunate, but I do fly with damage on, and today I've shut damage off just because I know sort of what's going to be happening to this poor helicopter. So when it comes to aerobatics with helicopters, there's a couple things you have to know. Now, first of all, our wing spins. It has quite a bit of energy, actually. It actually has a very strong gyroscopic effect on the helicopter as well, which tends to make everything we do come out at a 90-degree angle to where we want it to be. Another common problem that we're going to have with helicopters when we're trying to do aerobatics is the fact because we have that big old wing that's doing all the work, whenever we demand more out of it, we tend to slow everything down, which of course, as you know from regular aircraft, that puts you into that nasty stall territory, which is very, very unpleasant. When you combine those two effects, you start having some problems pretty much right away. So the first thing we're going to do is just kind of show you just how challenging this can be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently increase my power. Again, I've got damage turned off, and I'm going to go ahead and lose a little bit of altitude. I'm going to get myself right into the kind of the red zone there. You can see I'm overpowering everything here. Build up a little bit of speed, and then we're just going to go ahead and execute a nice, gentle, very, very fast turn. Now, what you'll observe is during this turn, when we come out of it, our speed halves. It's not the beginning of the turn where our speed suddenly halves. It's the back end of the turn where the speed suddenly halves. Now, the reason that's really, really tricky is when we start doing the really, really silly maneuvers, we have to keep that in mind, that we're basically going to really have to lay off the power when we start getting, or I should say, lay off the cyclic as we start coming out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a little bit of altitude. That's a little bit better. And we're flying over Maine, by the way. If anybody was curious, I figured we'd come visit. I hadn't had a chance to fly up here this summer. I'm kind of disappointed. You can see my rotor is screaming at me. That's okay, though. Give it a few minutes to catch. There we go. Get everything back loaded up here. That's the one downside of that lovely slew button. So what we're going to do now is we're going to execute our first maneuver, which is going to be a lovely split S. This is definitely not something you want to do in a helicopter generally. So we're going to go ahead and try to unload the rotor a tiny bit. We don't want to make it too unloaded, otherwise it's going to overspeed when we come out, as you'll see in a few moments here. Load it up a little bit. We're going to bring our speed down just a little bit, trying to get this a little bit more stable. Okay, that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and do it. We're going to go ahead and take a right turn. The helicopter's going to flip upside down. Now remember, our lift is now reversed, so we're going to go ahead and back off the cyclic just a little bit. And one of the things you'll observe as we do this is we lose massive amounts of altitude. And there we go. And you can see we come flying out of that just like that. A couple things you probably observed during our split S maneuver. The first one, of course, is the insane amount of altitude we lost. The other thing you probably noticed is as we came into the split S, kind of that first quarter turn there, you probably observed the fact that we had to back the collective up because our lift was now down. Just kind of one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's basically pulling us towards the earth there. The other thing you probably observed is the incredible amount of altitude that we lost during that particular maneuver. Just giving you an idea of, like, we're just not flying anymore. And of course, you probably watched my rotor RPM was not happy with me towards the end. We definitely would have damaged the helicopter if we tried that. So of course, we're going to do a split S. So let's get some altitude again and do something more dangerous. Now that's what I call altitude. The fun thing about helicopters is I've never heard of helicopters fly. It doesn't mean you can't fly this high in a helicopter. It just means you're probably getting close to setting world records flying this high in a helicopter. But for our next maneuver, we're going to need this altitude. Now, we're going to be doing a flip. Now, the problem with a flip, as everybody will know, is the fact that we have to get up and over, and then we have to do everything in reverse. So as we're going to be building up that speed, you can see we're already exceeding 100 knots indicated, but we're also at, 6,500 feet or 6,750 feet here, which is plenty high enough to make it rather unpleasant from a true airspeed perspective. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bring the nose down. Again, we don't like to push down. All we have to do is build up a little bit of speed here. So I'm going to only gently get some speed here. I don't want to go ramming on this that hard. When we do our flip here, it's going to be very, very, very hard to be able to keep the nose where we want it. As we slow down, that torque effect is going to get very, very, very noticeable. So we're going to go ahead and execute it. I'm going to go ahead and basically pull back just a little bit. Speed's going to start bleeding off. And now you're going to have to go ahead and get on the right foot, a little bit of left foot. And remember, we're being pulled upside down now. So you're just going to go ahead and bring the collective down, push forward just a little bit. All right, we're going to go ahead and bring up just a little bit of collective. Watch your RPM. And we're going to bring it up just like that. Nice. Did you hear that blade slap? It was not happy with me at all. And of course, you can see because we had so much altitude, even though we just lost, literally we're at 5,400 feet right now. We lost about 1,000 feet with that maneuver. You can see that everything was relatively smooth, and of course, we didn't damage anything. Now, another fun thing to do in helicopters that you really shouldn't do in helicopters is doing a corkscrew. Now, everybody thinks corkscrews, barrel rolls, they think aileron rolls. We have no ailerons, so we can't execute it. The real problem with this one, as you'll probably see in a second, is that incredibly asymmetric lift that's going to be hitting us across the rotor disc here. So go ahead and give us a little bit of power. If I were to simply take my controls and jam them to the left, which is going to be the easier direction to turn in here, a little bit better resistance here, what you'll observe is as I come around, you're going to get a low RPM warning, and you're also going to see the nose of the helicopter start to drop. And again, the reason we've unloaded that rotor so aggressively when you do that. So what we have to do is as we go, we have to actually put in some opposite foot. So if we were to go to the right, I actually got to push left foot here. We're going to go ahead and push right foot as we come out. And then we're going to try to catch it before it tries to get too serious on us. But one of the things you see is since we truly have no load on that rotor, that's why we got that little RPM warning a second ago, you can see just how challenged that gets to become. Now, the last maneuver we're going to do, and again, we're having a little bit of fun with this poor helicopter, is a one that's an aircraft maneuver, which is the shandelle. Now, shandelle for us in aircraft land, if you want to think about it as an Immelman turn, it's basically going to be the same thing, trying to gain as much altitude as we possibly can and basically ending up at a stall. Remember, with helicopters, though, we don't stall as long as we have some lift going. So I'm basically going to push my nose over here. We're going to build up a little bit of speed here. And you can see catching up about 500. Again, we still have about, 5,200 feet underneath us, which makes it rather challenging. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to push the nose down just a tiny bit, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull up and a little bit of right foot when you do this. So you'll know what I mean. Now, what you're probably observing is we're gaining a lot of altitude. We're also losing a ton of speed. You start getting a little slow. You got to kind of bring it. Again, use your feet here. Use your feet. And what's going to happen is, I'm going to get a low rotor RPM as it starts to load. And we're just going to go ahead and balance ourselves out. I'm going to actually reduce some collective here to try to get my RPM back up. There we go. Got it. Woo! We are just loaded. Bingo. And you can see there that we basically executed that nice little turn, gained a ton of altitude. We started at 52 or at 6,000. And we were also basically stalled because we were loading the rotor so hard. Remember, at this altitude, our helicopter, the air is thinner, so we're not going to be getting the same performance as we would at lower altitude, but you can still see exactly what that is. So as you can see, aerobatics in a helicopter are possible. Pretty much everything we demonstrated would have probably damaged the helicopter in some way. So there's always something you want to kind of think of. One really, really entertaining thing to do, though, of course, that's end our video here, is I'm just going to go put the collective to 0. And one of the reasons I love that is the helicopter. I'm not touching the controls right now. It's just very interesting to see what helicopters do when you don't touch anything. And the reason I love stuff like this is a great way to stress out audiences. You'll probably notice we're starting to enter a flat spin here. I'll go make the flat spin a little bit worse. And we're going to go ahead and